Hello guys, this is Billy Fletcher again here from Alliance Champions Training Center, and today I want to talk a little bit about something that's something I've been really thinking about lately quite a bit, and it's really the role of the coach as what I like to refer to as an option facilitator. And so what does that really mean? So in terms of, from my perspective as a coach, you know, we have a lot of different things that we do at our particular gym. We have adult functional fitness training. We have kids sports performance training. We have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the martial arts that we teach, and also even within all of that, we really look at trying to create a culture in a gym where people can come and also, like I say all the time, is not just a place to train to get better in the gym, but also to help and optimize your life outside the gym. So there's a lot of different things going on there, but kind of a common denominator I see, and one of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about lately is really our role is really to provide options and to try to facilitate those options. And so kind of what does that mean is that, like, you go for a coach or for guidance for someone who maybe has had more experience or been in a certain field for longer than you have. And so in my case, really training has been what I've done my entire adult career for over now, like close to really 30 years. And it doesn't mean that I'm smarter by any stretch of the imagination, but those are the things that I think about on a daily basis almost every day. So, I'm kind of a boring person if you're not talking about those things. So if it's not about training or jiu-jitsu or something to do with life optimization, a lot of times I don't have a lot to say. And but with those things, I get very excited. So it's just I spend a lot of time, thinking about those things. And then also, I look at the training centers as a lab. So every day I get asked questions, or I get to see different people's responses to different things that we bring up. And so one of the things, one of the reasons I've been thinking about this more lately is that trying to really change my perspective on how we facilitate those options, because my personality is that I'm always searching for the best way to do things. And so in the past, I would tend to look at things as more white and black. So this is the right way, this is the wrong way to do something. And so really, a lot of times it's not so much the case of right versus wrong, but it's more like which way is going to be best, and which way, and that can be different for each individual. So just using as an example, we're in the midst of a nutrition challenge that we're doing right now. It's just the way I try to offer it up is it's an experiment. So for us, kind of to keep it real simple, is it's more or less an experiment with going to a primal eating plan, and then even transitioning someone into a ketogenic diet. Before, if we'd had that type of approach, it would be, this is what everybody needs to do. Well, that's not really how we're approaching it. We're approaching it as, look, this can be an experiment. Some people have done fantastic on it. They feel better. Their performance in the gym is better. They've lost weight. Their energy's better, all these things. So that's a very positive thing. So for that person, hey, we found something that works. Why don't we try to incorporate that? And if we can sustain it, then that's a win. For someone else, it might not work as well. For other people, it might be, they might do better on a vegetarian diet, or they might do better, on a, more of a just watching calories or whatever. So we're really just trying to provide a different perspective, and then try to provide, options for really trying to, nutrition we know is important, but try to provide options within that domain of how to make it work for you to reach your particular goal. So that's just an example of how we might do that. And another one might be an example on exercise correction. So when we're performing a particular exercise, one of the things I'm really working hard on now is not saying right or wrong, but is there a better way? So if you're doing a squat, for instance, there's some basic fundamental things with a squat. But sometimes they're not, it's not that you're doing it wrong, but maybe if we can find a better way and experiment with that, if that works for you, then move in that direction. So that's a couple of the just simple concepts that we try to incorporate with that. But on a bigger scale, really how I look at the option facilitation is just, again, it's providing a different perspective. So a lot of times, all of us, we have barriers, we have obstacles that we run into trying to reach certain goals. And so all we're bringing to the table is maybe a different perspective, because sometimes we can't see a way either, over or around or through that obstacle. So sometimes just creating a different perspective allows us to see a way around that and help us to get results. And then along with that, recently I listened to a very interesting podcast. A gentleman I'd read about before. His name is David Goggins, and he's a former Navy SEAL. I think I read about him first in a book by Jesse Itzler. It was called Living with a SEAL. It's a very entertaining book. Has some great lessons in it. In the book, they never name David by his name. They just call him SEAL. And then later, I found out that's who it was. And then found out this guy has done some incredible things. And really, I guess he's kind of known now. A lot of people think of him as like one of the mentally toughest guys on the planet. That's kind of his, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of his goal is to be that guy, right? So what's cool about him, though, is some of the lessons from that, in talking about option facilitation and so forth, is that listening to his story kind of like made me think of some things differently, gave me a different perspective. So just give you an idea of some of the things he's done. So he set the world record in pull-ups. It was in 17 hours. I think it was a 24-hour span that he had, but he broke the record in 17 hours. It was over 4,000 pull-ups. Pretty amazing. And then another thing that he had, kind of one of his big accomplishments, he ran 205 miles in 39 hours. Okay, so when you hear those numbers, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like a gentleman just passed away not too long ago, I think this past week, Roger Bannister. When he first broke the 4-minute mile, everybody said it was impossible. Like physiologically that nobody could break the 4-minute mile barrier. And then within the next couple of years, I think over 20-something people broke it, and thousands of people have done it since then. He kind of set the standard, so he gave us a different perspective on what's possible. So kind of using David as an example of some of those things is that what I realize is that a lot of times when we look at these different perspectives, a lot of times the limitations we put on ourselves are not. We tend to think they're genetic or environmental, like how we were brought up, or maybe our genetic limitations. But a lot of times they're just based on really our own mindset. And again, using David's example, he's one of many examples you could use. But he grew up with a very rough childhood. At one time, he was 297 pounds. So for a guy 297, and plus he was deathly afraid of water. So he became a Navy SEAL, and then later do all these crazy endurance things. He was really a guy that was overweight at one point of his life. And so that's one aspect of it. The other is that a couple other things I've learned from listening to David is that, if you want to be your best self, then really you need to be willing to face fear, okay, which I think is a challenge for all of us. And then another big one for me is also to be willing to fail. And that's one that, it's not easy. It's like, be willing to fail. In other words, try something that there's a good chance you might fail at, but every time you fail, you learn and you move forward and you continue to grow from that experience. And then the last little thing is just thinking about, the questions that you ask yourself. So I think this is from Tony Robbins from years ago. He said, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. And so one of David's questions he would say is, what if? If he had a goal, then he would say, what if? So for instance, in his situation, he's a black guy. And I forget the numbers he threw out there, but really there haven't been that many black Navy SEALs. And he said part of it's the water. A lot of them have negative buoyancy, so when they're swimming, it's a difficult challenge. So as he was going through his training, trying to prepare for that, he would say, what if I was that guy? What if I was one of the few in the history of man to be able to make it through that process? So that's one question you can ask. Another one is when it comes to like lifestyle things that you're doing, exercise, so on and so forth, is how is that working for me? So sometimes we get stuck in a rut where we're doing this thing and then we're not really looking at how it's impacting us, and we just get stuck in a kind of like on a wheel there, just kind of spinning our wheels. And if we don't take a step back and reflect, how is that working for me? If it's not working, then that's where the experimentation comes in. And then again, as a coach, our job is really to step in and say, okay, if you want to try something different, maybe try this approach versus the approach that you've used in the past. So that's just a couple ways that I look at, as part of the role of a coach and being an option facilitator, and just some things to think about, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you in your reaching your goals. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.